Tom Tolbert is out at KNBR. He's been laid off by Cumulus Media, who owns KNBR. 28 years at KNBR. It's been a long run and a very memorable run, a great run in any industry. You're somewhere for 28 years. Today, Tom had his final show. At least KNBR let him have one more show and have, I don't know if I'd call it a proper send-off, but they did what they could with one show, and they had a lot of guests. Brent Jones, Kyle Shanahan, Ray Ratto, and I think Steve Young was even on later as well. And what a long period of time. In 1996 to nearly the end of 2024, Tom partnered with Ralph Barbieri. That's where he began with KNBR. It was the Razor and Mr. T. They had, I believe it was 15 years together. And then following Ralph, he was teamed up with Ray Ratto, who is never easy to partner with. Then it was John Lund. Then they had that period of time in Bay Area Sports Radio where they had to have teams of three doing radio shows, which was interesting, but it was too much. He was with Rod Brooks and Larry Krueger, and then finally with Adam Copeland. And that speaks some of his versatility, that he could work with all of those different partners and pull it off and make it work. And he was the one that survived throughout those 28 years until now. And there's been so much turnover at KNBR, and I thought that if anyone was safe, if anyone would hold on to their job, it would be Tom Tolbert. He would have that position just about as long as he would want. But not even he lasted with cutbacks. He's been laid off. I mean, you see pretty much almost any of the big names in the market have been let go. I mean, I start this off with an episode on Damon Bruce and Ray Ratto in 95.7 The Game, and then about a year ago you had Paul McCaffrey and FP Santangelo. And the only real big name that's left, I mean, after the days of Gary and Ralph, who's left, really, as a big name? Greg Papa. I mean, Brian Murphy has been with KNBR about 20 years, but I don't really consider him a big name. I mean, he is a Giants homer. He's a KNBR man all the way. You know, what's different about Tom was he wasn't a homer, but at the same time, I don't feel he was always as hard on the teams as he should have been, especially the Giants. He didn't have a big rooting interest in the Bay Area teams. He couldn't say anything too hard about the Warriors because of his close friendship with Steve Kerr. For the most part, he was fair. But you know how it is at KNBR. If you're too critical of the Giants, you're out of there. One of the things about Tom was he was cool. He was very relatable, especially for a former athlete. It's just like the average man would like to hang out with him. That's how it always was with him, and that's one of the reasons why he could get along with so many partners that he had over 28 years of being at KNBR. And for a former NBA player, unlike so many, he could talk intelligently about baseball, about football, all three of the major sports. That's rare that a professional athlete can do that. That just doesn't happen very much. But Tom, he knew his sports. I'm not going to sit here and say he was my favorite host on KNBR or either station, because when Damon went over to 95.7 The Game, I'd listen to Damon on the afternoons. I would still listen some to KNBR here and there, but I pretty much went over to 95.7 The Game. But when Tom started off at KNBR, I mean, this goes back for me. I was in elementary school. I would hear him during my first part-time job, all the way, well into adulthood. There has never been a time that I've listened to sports radio where he had not been on the air. So this is a change. This is a change for a lot of people, and he's been here at KNBR during two dynasties. It was the Giants with the Bochy years, and then Steve Kerr and Curry's Warriors dynasty. You think of memorable interviews, and he had the interviews with Ralph, the heated interviews that Ralph had with Brian Sabian, or Steve Kerr, his very good friend. Steve Kerr, Brent Jones, Steve Young. I mean, those are the ones they'd done for years and years. And of course, he had the best chemistry, the best partnership with Ralph, because they did balance each other out. Ralph was the razor. He was sharp. Sometimes he was short. He was direct with people, Ralph, and he would challenge people, and Tom would bring that cool change to that shift. And that's a big shift in radio, that afternoon drive home. I mean, those are the two most important ones traditionally, are the morning shift leading off and then drive home. But honestly, for me, my opinion, it was always the post game. I think that's why I took a liking to Larry Krueger. That's why I took a liking to Damon Bruce, especially the Late Show and Sports Phone post game, where fans are very passionate, sometimes are over emotional at the end of the games. And in that time slot growing up, that was when you'd get the most honesty, at least with Krueger and Bruce. But I had great respect for what the afternoon show was on KNBR for all those years. And the sad thing now is you don't have people really with much history there anymore. Very little history. I mean, all you really have is Brian Murphy in the morning. I'm not so much of a Brian Murphy guy. That's about it at KNBR. Because, with Greg Papa, I will always see Greg Papa as the Raiders play-by-play man. It doesn't matter. He's been with the 49ers now for years. but I will always see Greg Papa as a Raider. Besides that, at KNBR, I mean, what do you have? Oh, well, Larry Krueger's back in a very limited capacity, but you just listen to the Krug show on YouTube. Why would you? I mean, I don't really bother to go out of my way to listen to him covering the 49ers. I may catch it a little bit here on KNBR, but just go to the Krug show. And then 95.7 The Game, once Damon Ratto left, I left. But who's next? Who's next to go? I would imagine Brian Murphy's next to go, just because of seniority. And Greg Papa is only safe because he works for the 49ers. If he didn't work for the 49ers, then he would be gone too. I mean, you're sure of that. Because it doesn't matter, because KNBR is not even the ones making the decision. It's Cumulus Media, and it's not about performance, it's about money. It's all about going cheap now, and they don't care about the listeners. And KNBR has always been so heavy on advertising. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you'd make the switch to 95.7 The Game, because you do just get more sports. There's less advertising, but now that you have all the shows online and YouTube and all the podcasts, just go there. Just go there. They have advertisers, they have sponsors. You can just skip over it if you want. It's your choice. But it is a sad time in various sports radio, just to see the decline. It'll be interesting to see if Tom Tolbert, what he may do next. And then the other KNBR host that was let go was John Lund, who was one of Tolbert's partners, who in many ways was the sidekick to Greg Papa. He was with Papa on 95.7, and then when Papa came over to KNBR, they partnered up again. So you learn with this next generation, you don't get attached to people in radio. You don't, and there's no reason to, and you are better off listening to various podcasts because they go deeper. There's less advertising, and you just listen at your convenience. Listen at your convenience. We have the memories, and I was glad, I was thankful I grew up when I did, because you had the end of great sports radio. Gary, Tony Bruno. I got the years of Ralph and Tom. Larry Krueger, Damon Bruce. Those were the highlights from my years of listening on the radio. I mean, actually listening on the radio. I'd either be listening to post-game, sports phone, after school, in the background while doing homework. Great times. Great times, but it's not the same, won't be the same. The quality of KNBR has gone way down. You don't have the familiar voices anymore. You won't have anyone that's overly critical of the Giants. And then we look at 95.7 The Game. Their quality has declined as well. So both stations, their best days are way behind them. And radio especially sports radio here in the Bay Area, is on its last legs.